Welcome to the Limerick's Life podcast with your hosts, Sharon Slater
and Peter.
Hi all, and welcome to episode 5 of the Limerick's Life podcast. I'm Sharon and I know about history.
I'm Peter and I don't know about history. So what are you telling us about today?
Remember in the last episode, The Sound of Bacon, how we had a link with a popular musical and film?
Mm-hmm.
How do you fancy another Limerick link to the movies?
Ooh, more famous people.
Let's start in the middle of O'Connell Street. Perhaps you have some banking to do, so you wandered down to the AIB, but it's a Sunday, so it's closed.
Is that Fly the Conchords reference?
Yes, it was.
Nice.
The buildings on this site were not always closed on a Sunday, and they were not always solely businesses.
Oh?
Yes, let's take a step back. In 1765, a young couple, Anthony Peter Lefroy, a soldier posted in Limerick, and Anne Gardner, had a secret marriage.
Ooh.
Well, secret enough that Anthony's uncle and benefactor, Benjamin Langlois, did not know about the marriage until after the first 5 daughters were born.
So 5 kids later, he didn't suspect a thing. Do we know the daughters' names?
There was Lucy, Phoebe, Catherine, Sarah, and a 5th unnamed daughter who probably died young.
Oh, wouldn't be many records of them, so...
Finally, on the 8th of January 1776, a son and heir was born at 108 Georgia Street, now the AIB Bank on O'Connell Street, in the heart of what was then the newly developed Newtown Perry in Limerick City. There was scaffolding all over the place at the time.
Child number 6, though?
Yes, and this time Anthony decided to break the news to his uncle. To soften the blow, he gave his son the name Thomas Langlois Lefroy.
Ooh, that was a smart move.
It was.
Was Tom the only son?
Oh, absolutely not. There was another 6 children came after Tom. Anthony, Elizabeth, Benjamin, named after that uncle, Christopher, Anne, and Henry.
What is with people in this podcast having 1 billion children? Now, I know it was a different time, but still, 12 children is a lot.
Yes, but out of those 12 children, Tom was the most important because he was the heir.
The firstborn son.
Firstborn son,
Yeah.
And the rich uncle was needed at this time. Uncle Benjamin took a personal interest in Tom's education and bombarded his father with advice, which, since he held the money, were virtual commands.
What kind of education was Benjamin pushing Tom to have?
Well, it must be the classical studies, of course. He must also take exercise, learn to ride and fence.
Very, very rich people activities.
Very rich people. He started his education at home in Limerick until he was 14, when he was moved to Dublin for his secondary education.
14 years old and going up to Dublin to study by himself. It's a lot for a kid.
Yeah, but when you're the heir, you need to be the best.
Yeah.
For a 3rd level, Uncle Benjamin would have preferred Oxford, where Tom's uncle, Reverend George Lefroy, was a fellow of All Saints College, in addition to having a rectory in Hampshire. But Tom's father, remembering perhaps how he had left home and his parents at an early age and not seen them again for 23 years.
Wow, 23 years.
Drew a line at this, and he urged the advantages of Trinity College, Dublin. Benjamin was persuaded.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'm going to quote, "If he can but obtain the great prize at last of a fellowship, I shall consider him safely landed."
That's a pretty sentence.
Wasn't it just? Although Uncle Benjamin was shown as harsh in Becoming Jane, the real man described Tom as having everything in his temper and character that can conciliate affections, a good heart, a good mind, good sense, and as little to correcting him as I ever saw in one of his age.
Becoming Jane, what's the story there?
Oh, that's a 2007 film about a portion of Tom's life.
Ooh.
Let's dig into that. So 1 month before Tom was born in Limerick, across the Irish Sea, a baby girl was born on the 16th of December, 1775. This little girl grew up to be the author Jane Austen.
The Jane Austen?
The one and only.
So how did the two of them meet?
Tom and Jane met while Tom was spending the Christmas of 1795-1796, so when they were about 21, with his uncle George Lefroy at that rectory that he had in Ash. So that was not too far from Stevenson, where the Austen family lived. Tom's aunt, Mrs. Lefroy, was a great friend of the Austen ladies. It was while attending balls in the neighbourhood that Tom and Jane danced the night away over the holiday season.
So what did Jane think of Tom when they first met?
Jane remarked that Tom is very gentlemanly-like, good-looking, pleasant young man.
There's worse ways to be described, I suppose.
Assessing the connection between Tom and Jane must begin with what Austen actually said about the connection they had. Her letter on the 9th of January 1796, during this holiday season, speaks teasingly to her sister Cassandra, and she said, "You'll scold me so much at the nice long letter in which I have at this moment received from you, that I am almost afraid to tell you how my Irish friend and I behaved." She continued, "We were shocking in the ways of dancing and sitting down together at the 3 holiday balls."
I wonder what dance moves they were doing. Twerking, probably not. Maybe the running man. They must have been getting along well, so.
They were, but even then she was already aware of his impending departure. She said to her sister, "He leaves the country soon after next Friday, on which day we are to have a dance at Ash after all."
Ash?
That was where Tom's uncle lived.
Oh, yes, with the rectory.
With the rectory.
Yes.
She also admits, "But as to our having ever met, except at the last 3 balls, I cannot say much." This really emphasised their limited contact. They most certainly weren't alone in the woods together or travelling to London as shown in the movie Becoming Jane.
Yeah.
Strangely, she did note that Tom ran away when we, most likely Jane and her mother, called on Mrs. Lefroy a few days ago. She assumed that he was ashamed of coming to Stevenson.
How old would Tom have been at this time?
He was about 21. Both
Okay,
of them were. Just a month.
Still young.
A few days after the running incident, Tom appears at Stevenson, accompanied by his teenage cousin, George Lefroy, and lends her a copy of Tom Jones.
It's not unusual to be loved
No.
by anyone.
Not that Tom Jones.
Aw.
Tom Jones, the novel by Henry Fielding. Now, like your Tom Jones, it is an amazingly racy novel, not likely to be found on the shelves of her clergyman father's library. On the 14th of January, so another week later, 1796, she writes to her sister again, "I rather expect to receive an offer, presumably of a dance, from my friend in the course of the evening at the 4th ball in Ash. I shall refuse him, however, unless he promises to give away his white coat." This was referring to Tom's fashion choice, reflecting the novel Tom Jones.
She's a lady. Whoa, whoa,
No,
whoa, she's
still
a
not
lady.
that Tom Jones.
Aw.
If Jane is not being facetious in this letter, she is unfortunately expecting more from Tom Lefroy than he has even hinted at offering.
Did others see them as a couple?
Oh yes, they did. One acquaintance going so far as sketching a picture of Tom for Jane to keep.
Oh, that's sweet.
But 4 weeks after they met, Jane and her Irish friend were forced apart. He was called to his uncle's house to study at the bar to advance his law degree. Perhaps Jane was more deeply involved than she cared to admit. Mrs. Lefroy evidently thought so. She took fright and bundled Tom up as quickly as possible.
Why would she do that?
You've to remember, at the time, Jane was just a penniless daughter of a country parson. She wasn't the literary figure that we know her as today. It was a most unsuitable match for a young man expected to rise with distinction. Remember, the heir of his family. And he already had a bundle of siblings that he had to take care of. You know, having a penniless wife was not going to work.
I bet Miss Lefroy was kicking herself, considering who Jane Austen would turn to be.
So Tom was sent to London to read for the bar. He was entered at Lincoln Inn and lodged with his uncle Benjamin, who kept a snug bachelor home.
So he was staying with his uncle, but did he have many colleagues around his age that he was close with?
Yeah, Tom's closest friend in college was another Tom, Thomas Paul. He was the son of Geoffrey Paul, who owned a property and a mansion in County Wexford. Tom Paul had one sister, Mary. In 1797, Tom returned to Ireland to be called to the Irish bar, and with this promotion in his career, he requested permission to ask for the hand of Mary Paul.
Thomas's sister?
Yeah, the sister of his best friend.
Oh, nice.
This was duly granted, and they became engaged. Tom then left her, went back to London to complete his legal studies.
What was Mary like?
Mary was more suitable match for Tom. She was born into that wealthy family, and she had a large dowry, and again, Tom was the heir of his family, but a rake of siblings. They were married in Wales in 1799 and went to live in Dublin and had 8 children.
Another couple with 1 million kids.
That same year, 1799, when Tom's name cropped up in conversation, Jane Austen was too proud to inquire after him, although she was glad enough to get news of him gleaned by her father.
That must have been a nice blast from the past for her, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was nice, but it was definitely there. Tom started having those children, and his first daughter was named Jane Christmas Lefroy.
Ooh, that's a name.
Isn't it? And when did he meet Jane Austen?
It's a bit suspect right there.
Scholars tend to debate over the origin of this name. You know, some, of course, think it comes from Jane Austen, but others more likely believe that it came from Tom's mother-in-law, who was also called Jane.
I choose to believe it was after Jane Austen.
Especially with the Christmas thrown in there.
Do we know the names of their other children?
Yeah, the eldest son was named after Tom's father, Anthony, which kind of makes sense for the eldest daughter to be named after a relative like that too.
Yeah.
Another of his children was called Benjamin, after that uncle, but he died young, so we don't have anything about him.
Yeah.
We know that none of his 3 daughters married.
Oh.
Back to Tom, though. Within about a year or so of his marriage to Mary, the best friend and Mary's brother, Thomas Paul, who was the heir to his family's fortune, died suddenly.
Oh, he must have been young enough.
He was, and this now led Mary to become the heiress of the Paul estates.
Oh, so she's worth a lot now.
Mm-hmm. So this was totally unexpected.
Yeah.
You know, Tom didn't expect that his best friend was going to die and that his new wife was going to inherit this fortune. But some biographies of Jane Austen kind of think that Tom trifled with Jane's affection and threw her over in order to marry an heiress.
Oh.
Yeah. This isn't really likely, though, because Tom probably knew the sister of his best friend in college.
Yeah.
Would have met her long before he ever met Jane Austen.
Oh.
Yeah. And Jane was the prodigy of Tom's aunt up in Stevenson, you know, in Ash and Stevenson. So this meant that Tom had to be cordial to her, but he had to avoid becoming embroiled in anything up there. And when he got married to Mary, she was not an heiress, and she was not regarded as likely to ever become an heiress.
Little did they know.
So it wasn't like in Jane Austen's books, where this one guy has got another woman on the side and trauma of it all. This wasn't the end of the story of Tom and Jane. In a passage in Jane Austen's letter to her sister Cassandra in 1805, it suggests that Jane and Tom may have met again in Bath.
Can we hear this letter?
Okay, this is a bit convoluted, but let's give it a go. Richard Chamberlain and a young Ripley from Mr. Morgan's school were there, and our visit did very well. This morning we have been to see Miss Chamberlain, look hot on horseback. 7 years and 4 months ago, we went to see the same riding house to see Miss Lefroy's performance. What a different set we are moving in. But 7 years, I suppose, are enough to change every pore of one's skin and every feeling of one's mind. It's interesting to note the counting of months as well as years. This is where their known acquaintance in life ends. So it was really this brief encounter at that Christmas and these follow-on little bits that led to the film Becoming Jane. You know, it starred James McAvoy and Anne Hathaway.
Ooh, I like both of them. I have to give it a watch. I'll say that's inaccurate, that's inaccurate.
So although we know that they didn't meet again, or we're pretty sure that they didn't meet again, upon learning of Jane's death in 1817, Tom travelled from Ireland to England to pay his respects. So there was still a connection between them in some way.
Yeah.
Later, he would buy a publisher's rejection letter for Jane's early version of Pride and Prejudice. There was definitely still a connection. So how do we know this? Well, there was a letter from Caroline Austen in 1869. This letter was later given to Thomas Edward Preston Lefroy, husband of Jemima Lefroy, who was the daughter of Anna Austen, Jane's niece, and Benjamin Lefroy, Tom's young cousin, who were married in 1814. So although Tom and Jane didn't get together,
The family's still linked.
the families are still linked.
Interesting.
The families ended up being connected again further down the line in 1889 when their granddaughter, Florence Lefroy, married Reverend Augustus Austen Lee.
So where did Tom's career go?
So Tom rapidly became prominent at the Irish bar. About 1810, he acquired the estate of Carriglass, and with his own political career on the rise, he decided to pull down the rambling old house and replace it with a noble structure in the latest style. There were problems though. The tenants had to be evicted to clear the grounds for a layout on a suitable scale.
Yeah.
But at the time, Tom was generous and the process of eviction went relatively smoothly.
Oh, it's nice to hear he wasn't exploiting or being shady with the tenants.
Okay.
Oh.
Tom was elected to the House of Commons in 1830 as a Tory, and he became a member of the Privy Council in Ireland in 1835. And he stayed as a politician, continuing as an MP for Dublin University, and was appointed as an Irish judge in 1841. Finally, in 1852, he was promoted to Chief Justice of the Court of the Queen's Bench in Ireland.
That's a very impressive career.
In his later years, Tom carried a Bible and argued that only a proper system of education could improve the morals of the lower classes. He was against extending the vote to the middle classes.
Ooh.
Yeah, he definitely didn't want women voting.
Ooh.
He also opposed Catholic emancipation, so no Catholics, no middle class, no women, and founded a society to send Protestant missionaries into Catholic areas. Many of his decisions were harsh. During the famine, he ordered the transportation of the Young Ireland movement leader, John Mitchell, for encouraging tenants not to pay rent.
Transportation? So he was shipped off?
Yeah, people were sent to the penal colonies in Australia. But later, that guy, John Mitchell,
Yeah.
he escaped to America.
Oh, there's a story there.
It's a whole other story. So Tom's hand in oppressing Catholics when his Huguenot ancestors had fled oppression in France it's such an irony, and Jane would have loved that.
Yeah.
Tom was not liked by Daniel O'Connell, the liberator, who believed Tom was a prime example of a lawyer promoted because of his Protestant religion over his actual skills.
Yeah. So he sounds like a very busy man. Did he have time for anything else?
Oh, absolutely. He was going non-stop. In his personal life, he was interested in astronomy.
Oh.
Yeah. And in 1846, he visited William Parsons, who had a new telescope, and he tried that out.
Oh.
Yeah, so he had astronomy, he had the law, he had that big family. He was kept busy the entire time.
Yeah.
And despite some allegations in Parliament that he was too old to do the job, Tom did not resign as Chief Justice until 1866, when he was 90.
Staying in a position of power until you're 90 is insane. Was that common at all, or was he a real outlier?
Some people held jobs for life, but as we know all too well right now with the political situations around the world, that maybe a retirement age should be
mandatory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So 3 years after he retired, he died at the ripe old age of 93.
It's a good age.
The year after his death, his nephew wrote a letter to one of Jane Austen's relatives saying, "My late venerable uncle said in so many words that he was in love with her, although he qualified his confession by saying it was a boyish love. As this occurred in a friendly and private conversation, I feel some doubt whether I ought to make it public."
So does that contradict what we were saying earlier on?
Yeah, it's a hard one to tell because this came from a second-hand person and the reminiscences of an old man thinking back of the love that he might have had and lost. And by that stage, now, she was no longer a penniless, parson's daughter. She was this renowned author. So it's a case of, oh, I could have been married to her. Somebody famous and somebody not. But it was actually kind of a benefit for Jane.
Yeah.
Because not marrying Tom spared her a life of almost continuous pregnancy. Tom, as we know, he had those 8 children.
Yeah.
And he would have taken her back to Ireland, so she would have been in a foreign country having babies all the time. She wouldn't have had time to write multiple novels, that are all very much classics and really embedded in our education system and like our culture. Without the loss of Tom in her youth, we may never have seen Jane Austen's novels.
I guess things worked out, so.
That they do.
So, where can people go to visit Tom?
He died in Wicklow, but he's interred in a vault in Mount Jerome Cemetery in Dublin. So, do you have any more questions?
No questions, but I am going to go watch Becoming Jane.
We've got a movie list.
Nice.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Find out more about this and other Limerick stories at limerickslife.com and check us out on our social media. You can find Limerick's Life on buymeacoffee.com. Mine's a decaf.
And mine's a latte.